Good morning, it's today again. Welcome back to Joseph's Reserves. I'm Joseph and I store 20% of my income in the form of rare coins and precious metals. Today we're going to be talking about something that I think is massively overlooked in the silver stacking world, and honestly I didn't fully appreciate it until recently, and that's Canadian 80% silver. Between the history, math, and the different designs, there's a whole lot to cover here. So I'm going to do my best to answer the question, what is 80% silver, the math behind it, and show you the different designs to help you identify 80% silver. Congratulations to Maestro Metals for being the first to comment on my video yesterday. Thank you so much for the support. So let's go ahead and dive right into Canadian 80% silver. So to simply put it, the alloy is 80% silver and 20% copper. These were minted from 1920 to 1967. Now there's a twist. In 1968, there are quarters and half dollars that are still 80%, but we'll get to that. For now, we can understand this. These are the Canadian equivalent of what we in the United States call junk silver. I'm not sure if this is the general term for this silver in Canada, if they just say junk silver and know that they're talking about 80%, or if they'd have to specify Canadian junk or United States junk. And if anyone from Canada can help me explain any of these ideas of what it is actually like to buy this stuff or sell this stuff compared to United States junk silver, down in the comments, that would be really, really helpful. When you hear 80% silver, that's just the purity. That's the alloy of silver. So how much silver are you actually getting? $1 of face value of 80% Canadian silver is 0.6 troy ounces of pure silver. So there you have the baseline. $5 would be 3 ounces, $10 6, $50 is 30 ounces, and $100 is 60 ounces. It's very clean, easy math, not like the United States 90% silver where $1 face value is 0.715 ounces. So right away it seems like you're getting less silver per dollar, but that's just the face value. That's not what you're actually paying. When you pay for this stuff, since it is a lower purity alloy, most likely you'd be getting it a lot cheaper per ounce of silver than you would even the junk silver of the United States. So oftentimes, especially right now, this 80% silver is very, very inexpensive, and who knows, it might even perform really well later in the future. With how easy the math becomes and associated with a clean ounce number, it seems like this might even become more popular than 90%, with the dime being 0.06, the quarter being 0.15, and the half dollar being 0.3 ounces, as well as the actual $1 coin fitting that math at 0.06 ounces of silver. These are very easy numbers to work with rather than a lot of the math that's associated with 90% United States silver. As we take a look at Canadian 80% silver, we will find 5 distinct designs, starting with King George V. King George VI had 2 different types, and Queen Elizabeth II had a first and second portrait. I've separated between all the types here, so now let's take a close look at the King George V design. So this is going to be the oldest design. King George had reigned over Great Britain between 1911 and 1936. So 1920 falls right in the middle of that range. Before 1920, the Canadians were using sterling silver for their coins, 92.5%. But then in 1920, it dropped to 80%. So these ones, we're going to just have to check the date. You're going to have to make sure that you take a look at whether or not this is a sterling silver coin or an 80% silver coin. Canada also had a 5-cent silver coin that was sterling silver until 1919, and then they moved to a pure nickel 5-cent in 1922. That means that there are 2 years, the 1920 and 1921, that you can find in this design that is actually a 5-cent silver coin. After the death of King George V in 1936, the next ruler to get on coinage was King George VI. Now, there was another king in there, but I'll let you look into the scandal of King Edward VIII. But for now, we're going to focus on King George VI. As you can see, there's two different types. The inscription around the back of his head started with ETINDIMP. That was to indicate that he was also the Emperor of India. However, in 1948, India gained its own independence, so that was taken off the coin. We have these two different designs. There's really no difference in value between them, but you can see that this King George VI design was always 80% silver. This is an example where you don't really have to look at the date to know exactly what alloy it is. This is almost like our mercury dimes in the United States coinage. Without even checking the date, you can know for a fact that this design with King George VI does in fact contain 80% silver. And you can see that the designs of the reverse were becoming more standardized. You can see there's the shield on the 50 cent, the caribou on 25 cent, and the ship that remained on the 10-cent coin. The next design, the first portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, actually falls under the same category of this entire design being 80% silver. So the big difference you can see here between the first and second portrait actually has to do with her crown, or the leaves in her hair when it comes to the first portrait. The first portrait is sometimes called the young head, so Queen Elizabeth's young head design. You can also tell that the ribbons that hold her hair back look almost like a ponytail, especially when it's worn down. Queen Elizabeth came on to the coins in 1953, and it was changed to the second portrait in 1965. Canada also continued to make coins in 80% silver until 1968. However, in 1967, Canada had its 100-year independence anniversary. That year, they used a commemorative design as well as lowering the purity in the 10 cents and 25 cents down to 50% pure halfway through the year. So in that year, for 10 cents and 25 cents, you actually get a mix between some are 80% and some are 50%. In 1968, the 10 cent and 25 cent coin actually went from 50% silver to pure nickel. So those pure nickel ones are magnetic actually, so they're easy to find if you have a strong enough magnet. However, the 50 cent and dollar coins went immediately from 80% silver in 1967 to pure nickel in 1968. So there are no 50% silver Canadian 50-cent coins or $1 coins. Unfortunately, the 50% and 80% coins weigh the same amount. So differentiating between a 67 that is 50% and a 67 that is 80% is almost impossible without a sigma or performing a specific gravity test. I actually do have one of each purity right here in the 25-cent coins that I'll go ahead and pull out for you. When you look at these, you can see that the designs, while they're different than the caribous, they are similar to each other. There's no difference indicating which one is the 50% and which one is the 80%. They also weigh exactly the same. So you might not be able to tell without actually looking at the coin electrically. Another issue is that I believe these coins were plated because when looking at either of them at an XRF, they both look like sterling silver in the eyes of an XRF. The XRF can only look 10 microns deep, so I believe there was a layering issue that actually got the coins to that exact purity that we've been talking about. So I hope this helps you going through any Canadian coins that you either find, or if you have a large bulk of Canadian coins, it'll most likely help you go through and sort what is 80%. You can take the middle three designs, the King George the Sixth, as well as the Queen Elizabeth II, and know that it is just all of that design are 80% silver, and only check the dates on King George V, as well as the second portrait of Queen Elizabeth. Using a magnet to decipher which ones are pure nickel also helps quite a lot. And then checking the date for that 67 and 68 in the 10 cent and 25-cent coins will help you pull out the 50% silver. As far as stacking this Canadian 80% silver, I feel like most stackers focus on US 90% or government bullion or generic rounds, while Canadian 80% sits in this weird middle ground, which means that it's usually well underpriced. The fact that it can be found so cheaply and that it is divided into a much cleaner, easier way of calculating in troy ounces makes me think that this could possibly have a future in the stacking world. I'm not sure about what the future for 80% Canadian silver looks like, but for me, the idea of the multiple different designs as well as the history of a different country to learn about makes me very excited about learning about this Canadian 80% silver. So overall, let me know what you think about Canadian 80%. Are you stacking it? Would you ever possibly stack it? And what do you think about how easy it is to calculate how much silver is actually in these coins? If you're in Canada, please let me know how available are these coins? How available is the sterling silver from pre-1920? I'm very interested in what these coins look like and what they go for in Canada versus what they do here in the United States. If you know anything else about Canadian silver that I either skipped over or got entirely wrong, please let me know down in the comments. I'm curious if there is a rule of thumb like there is with the United States 90%. With the 90%, there's the $1.40 roundup that accounts for where. And with Canadian silver, I know that the zero point 0.6 ounces of silver makes it that $1.66 accounts for 1 ounce of silver. It could be that that could be rounded up to $1.70, or they can just assume the 0.6 ounces per dollar, or it could be weighed every single transaction. If anyone has some insight, please let me know. Let us know down in the comments. I just made my own line of coffee. Joseph's Reserves It's Today Again coffee. Most mornings aren't dramatic. They're quiet. You wake up, pour yourself a cup, and now you have a choice. Drift through the day or take hold of what's in front of you. That's really what this whole thing's about. Showing up, building good habits, staying disciplined in the small things. Whether that's stacking consistently, learning something new, or just being faithful with what you've been given. I put these words on every bag to remind myself first. Every morning is a gift. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, today. So take a breath, take a sip, and let's get to work. It's today again. You can now write me at Joseph's Reserves, 10160 Highway 242, Suite 800, number 401 in Conroe, Texas, zip code 77385. Make sure to include your information so I can write you back. If you like this video, go down and hit the thumbs up button. Go into the comment section to leave any questions or comments or to learn from the community that is also watching this video. Share the video with anyone you think may be interested in this topic and subscribe if you haven't already. But most of all, thank you so much for watching. And just remember, every ounce adds up. So no matter how small, just keep stacking.